Andrew Bobros here. I'll do a real quick video on Brandon Staley. It's kind of a nice little follow-up video to the Joe Lombardi video my brother did yesterday regarding Joe Lombardi and frustrations we have with the offense and kind of so on and so forth. But I've read a few articles. I just want to formulate some of my thoughts regarding Staley, potential coaching changes that could happen during the bye week. Then also get into I think what we really need to do the second half and really look at Brandon Staley's transcript on Monday with the media and see if we can't read a little in between the lines and sort of read the tea leaves and see what he's thinking moving forward in the bye. So, guys, let's get into it. All right, guys, before I get into the transcript, I want to kind of talk a little bit about Brandon Staley. Look, guys, know this, that I like Brandon Staley. I think he's a fantastic coach. I think what we're starting to see that he might be a little bit over his head, right? The NFL has really gone to this young um, coaching, head coach sort of mentality. You're seeing a lot of first-time head coaches really struggle. And right now, with all these injuries piling up, there's a lot of pressure on Brandon Staley's shoulders. I like Brandon Staley. I think he's a great guy, offensive genius. I think he's fantastic. He knows what he's doing. But the argument I think could be made, do we want to really go through his growing pains being a head coach here with the Chargers, right? And at the end of the day, he's got such a fantastic team, and these injuries keep mounting up, but we're not making adjustments or changes. And that's my argument across the board about Brandon Staley. I understand there's conversations to be made about having a system and having a plan and going forward. My argument is that he needs to adjust his plan, right? And right now, we're not seeing him do that. I consistently see us continue to run the same type of offense and defense, and not really make adjustments at all. And we just continue to just think, okay, we're just going to keep going, right? I mean, what's the definition of insanity? It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And I think that's partially the problem that I've had with Brandon Staley, right? That's the general summation that I have with Brandon Staley as a head coach this season so far. So again, bye week is a good opportunity for us to look at some things to change. Again, what are your thoughts? So I'm going to add a couple of thoughts on this. I'm going to go through a couple of, this is a great little video. Really from the Guilty as Charged podcast. I'm just going to go through this little tweet right here, and then I'm going to go through his transcript of, that he did with the media day and kind of read between the teams. But again, guys, as we discussed, yesterday my brother discussed Lombardi. I really do believe Lombardi needs to get let go. I hate to say that, right? Because you don't want to see people make adjustments. But my problem with Lombardi, and I've consistently said this over and over again, his play calling has become so predictable and so one note that the defense knows exactly what they're going to do. I'm even going to talk about that in the Staley transcript. He talks about that quite a bit. So I do think Shane Day, a switch up on the offensive side of the ball is important. Let me tell you why I think it's important. One, you don't want to lose the room with someone like a Justin Herbert. I'm reading between the tea leaves. I think he looks very frustrated. Every time I see his videos, he does not look happy. And obviously, he's got a rib injury. I mean, I don't want it to go from bad to worse, right? And I think we're in a very dangerous area right now where it could get much worse very shortly. And I think at least trying to have some fresh eyes come in on the offense would make a lot of sense. I also think that Ronaldo Hill should probably, and again, this is perfect. I think this is absolutely amazing what I think really should happen. Hill should be calling plays on defense. Now, again, just like he says here, Staley could focus on the offensive side of the ball with Lombardi, and focus on really sort of looking at the head coaching role as a whole above looking down rather than really micromanaging the defensive side of the ball. And again, there's a lot of things that I could say also about the way that Brandon Staley's also used people like J.C. Jackson. Really, J.C. Jackson's a man-to-man corner. I kind of wish that he had just kept him as man-to-man and not ran so much zone, but that's what we run here in Los Angeles. So, I think there's a lot to be said about what should be done during the bye week. I'm not very optimistic anything is going to be done, and that's my frustration, right? So again, let's go through Brandon Staley's transcript on Monday, right? And I'm gonna go through this pretty quickly. I don't want to go too deep into this. I'm going to give you the cliff notes at best, right? J.C. Jackson's out for the season, done. Mike Williams is pretty much day to day. I get the impression he may be back. Um, he could be back by the Falcons, but you never know, right? Interesting situation. Keenan Allen, he'll be back. I think Palmer will most likely back. I think Parham most likely will be back. Anyways, bottom line, Allen's usage, which was really strange. I kind of felt like, all right, let's see what you can do. And again, I do like what he says here. We didn't want to risk anything happening to it. I think there was just he couldn't go full steam, right? And so I think he went as far as he felt like he could go. And then he said, all right, I'm done. And having hamstring injuries, right? They linger a long time, and so we've talked about that a long time. So I'm kind of glad he's out. Unfortunately, um, you know, very interesting situation. This is an interesting part. Um, the regression offensively has been frustrating for me, right? Because and again, we're putting up yards, right? So we're not bad. We're still top 10 in the league, right? But you can argue that these are like junk yards. These are yards that just don't matter. What kind of frustrates me is we make no excuses. I do think there are excuses that come a little bit later on. We start talking about injuries and all these problems. And I'm like, well, that's an excuse. To me, what we're not doing offensively is doing anything creatively, right? We're running the same plays over and over again and expecting a different result. Um, there's been, we've had too many third and longs. We've had too many problems, and then they start talking about penalties a little further down the list here. But, you know, there's not a lot of, third and shorts. We've had some fourth and shorts here and there, but these are things that, you know, we're just not showing any inventiveness. We're not showing any type of newness to our offense, right? And look, my argument has always been this way about the NFL. The NFL will figure out a team, and the team as a whole will continue to just be worked, right? I'm going to give you a great example. When we lost to the Jags destroyed us. I was at that game, and they did a lot of very short dink and dunk type plays, like a lot of behind the line of scrimmage type plays, and they got yards after the catch. Now, I will say this: they did that worked very well against the Chargers. Now, the next game they lost, didn't do well. They're 2-5 now. They're not looking good, but they destroyed us. Well, why did they destroy us? We clearly did not have a game plan defensively to stop what they do. Now, every other team in the NFL has since then, right? So, again, a big part of a team continuing to progress rather than regress is changing the way you run your offense or your defense. My argument is that we are not doing that as a coaching staff. We're not changing anything. We're continuing going forward the same way and expecting us to just execute better or run better. We've had injuries. We've had long third downs. We've had, very long fourth downs. Again, it comes down to you have to do things differently, and we're not adjusting or changing. Again, we're starting out slow and we're ending slow. And that's a problem, right? That is a 110% coaching problem. Now, we've already talked about things we'd like to see changed in the coaching staff offensively and defensively. Well, let's see if we can read through the tea leaves and see if we're going to see anything that would lead us to believe that there might be some coaching changes moving forward. So let's go into this real quick. Are we doing everything we can to maximize our group? Well, that's what our focus is going forward. Now, here's the good point. Here's going back into coaching. I really believe a lot in our coaches and our players, and I'm confident that we'll figure it out. Right there, that just leads me to believe that there's not going to be any real changes in coaching. And that's frustrating, right? To me, I think you have to look at things. You have to make tough decisions in the NFL, right? And I know Brandon Staley and Joe Lombardi are friends, but there comes a point where you have to stop and say, all right, we need to make a change. Now, let's go a little more directly into it with Joe Lombardi. Well, I think it's been a much different season. We're 4-3. Again, puts us in a good position. I would argue if we were 3-4, then we probably would lose Joe Lombardi. You know, I think that probably would be a better or deeper outcome. But the fact that we're positive in the win category, they're probably not going to make a change. Now, again, when they started saying no excuses, here's some excuses. I think we're good at some adjustments. Anytime you lose an all pro left tackle, all pro wide receiver, um, moving parts. I mean, these are excuses, right? And I get that injuries occur, right? But Brandon Staley's consistently said this over and over again that that's part of the NFL, and you've got to learn to adapt and change. Again, my argument is that we're not adapting, we're not changing, right? Now, I will say this too. This is one of the things that I have, really looked at. Um, I do like that he's calling him out. He has to make improvements, just like the rest of us do. At least he's admitting that the team coaching staff is struggling. Okay. Again, what I would assume they're doing right now on a Tuesday, they're probably just huddling up as a team saying, how do we screw up that so bad? What do we need to do to fix it moving forward? Um, Again, preparation, that is 110% coaching, right? And we've already struggled. We've already talked about our struggles offensively the first half of every game. We put ourselves in a hole every game, and it's difficult to bring yourself out of it. That is a coaching problem, guys. That is not anything to do with the players. The players are doing what they're told, okay? And and again, it puts you in a position where you're in a hole, right? And again, preparation is directly on the offensive side of the ball. That is Joe Lombardi's job. Now, I know the level of prep and detail that he has. I'm just glad that he's our offensive coordinator. Again, does not sound like there's going to be any changes to Joe Lombardi. Now, I'm going to pause for just a moment and give you my thoughts on that specifically, because bottom line, he's clearly Brandon Staley is going to hitch his wagon to Joe Lombardi. In my opinion, I would make a change. Now, the reason why I would make a change is that if you make a change, what you're immediately doing to that offensive side of the ball is getting a different voice in there and a switch up. The nice thing about doing that at the bye is it gives you more time to game plan into the next week. The good news about that also would be like, wow, Falcons are going to say, well, what are they going to do offensively compared to what they did last, the first half of the season? So you would give a good opportunity for some major changes to happen. Like, again, I've talked about this ad nauseum. Where are the jet sweeps? We are doing some screens, a little more screens here and there, but we're not doing anything explosive down the field. Yes, we lost Jalen Guyton, but that's not an excuse. We need to start pushing the ball downfield. And we're not doing any of that. I mean, especially last week, we just did these checkdowns left and right, and that's just not what we need. So, again, I would love to see Joe Lombardi not be our offensive coordinator moving forward. But again, bottom line, guys, look, at the end of the day, we're giving Brandon Staley, he's clearly going to give himself enough rope to hang himself at this point. So if we continue to struggle offensively and continue to struggle defensively, then I'll make this prediction right now here at the bye. If we don't make the playoffs, we will not keep Brandon Staley as a head coach. I think we will make a coaching adjustment, especially with people like Sean Payton out there that want to coach, for the Chargers. So enough about Joe Lombardi. Not going to work out. We can talk a little bit about the ankle sprain. Bottom line, you know, uh, I think he'll probably be okay. I think there's a good chance he could come back for the Falcons game. I think we'll get Power Hammond. We'll have Palmer as well, which should be pretty good. So, anyways, it's interesting. Um, the defensive performance has been pretty interesting. I think we've seen, again, they keep talking about no excuses. There's a lot of, penalties and all these different things that were sort of thrown out there a lot, right? I like that he said at the very end he would need to do a better job coaching. Guys, at the end of the day, coaching has been horrible this season so far. And again, it's weird. It's weird to have this discussion when you start saying it's been horrible when you're 4-3, right? It's a lot better than 3-4, right? It's a lot better than, you know, you know, 2-5 or whatnot, right? But again, I still believe we should have played better or at least competed better in that game. And a lot of people talked about how, the Seahawks just beat us and they're just a better team. Guys, I don't buy that, right? I just don't. The amount of talent we have, and again, go back to the preseason, right? The amount of free agents we picked up and the level of pressure that we're putting on this team and the amount of talent we have. Look, we expect to be in the playoffs. Not only do we expect to be in the playoffs, we expect to compete for a Super Bowl berth. Look at teams like the Bills. The Bills had 14 to 15 injuries last week, and they still competed. They still looked good. They did not look bad, right? And so that's the difference, right? There's a difference between a team that is competing and the team that's not competing. Now, I want to go into that a little bit deeper down the road. Sebastian Joseph Day said something very interesting that really made me think a lot about our coaching staff, where the coaching staff is, and where it's going. But again, I do like that we're at least saying, I have to do a better job coaching. Bottom line, he does, right? Brandon Staley has to do a better job coaching the defense, also coaching the team as a whole, maybe even directing the offensive side of the ball a little bit better. And maybe what he should do is, if nothing else, make Ronaldo Hill run the defensive side of the balls, right? To call the plays, and he can put his input in on both offense and defense instead of him managing the defensive side of the ball. Because clearly, I think there's been some problems, right? And it's interesting when you start talking about job coaching. It's interesting how often he says things like, well, I called the right play, but we were just not in the right position. Again, that's still a coaching problem, right? You didn't coach your team up well enough to be in the right position to be successful on the play that you say is the right call for that play. So again, maybe it's a conversation around semantics, but what do you guys think, right? How would you rate Brandon Staley and a coaching staff, midway through the season at this point, right? So, yeah, Kenneth Walker, this rookie just beat the shit out of us. Really frustrating. Honestly, I was really just annoyed, seeing that. I literally turned the game off at that 74-yard touchdown. I said, we're done. I turned the game off. I didn't see the very end of the game. I was so upset and frustrated. Another, again, problem that I do want to discuss, I really feel like we're underutilizing Gerald Everett. One of the things that I really liked about bringing Gerald Everett on is he's a very athletic guy, right? We're not seeing any sort of tight end screens or any type of creative ways of giving him space, right? The thing about Gerald Everett, I think he's one of our best yards after catch players, right? He does a very good job. Well, maybe Austin Eckler would be the best, of course, but Gerald Everett is fantastic. We're not seeing jet sweeps. We're not seeing any type of plays to get him, additional yardage, right? So he needs to be part of the game plan a little more. I feel like what's the best word for it? I feel like he's on the field as a supporting member, but not really a leading role, if that makes sense, right? So I want to see him used a lot more the second half of the season. And like I said, he can make yards after contact, but I don't understand why we're not using him more frequently. I don't know. I would also say maybe there's been some discussions around him having the wrong idea of, does he break in, break out? Maybe he's not on the same page with Justin Herbert, but you know what? Hopefully in the bye week, they can get on the same page. I really think Everett, if nothing else, they need to use some jet sweeps. They need to do some different motion type options or some screens, something getting him involved, right? And clearly he's just not as involved as it needs to happen, right? So I don't want to talk about Jackson's injury. It's such a bummer. I just feel terrible. And I want to talk about this. This is another coaching conversation. This 4th and 1 play call just blew my mind. I couldn't even believe that we called that play. Look, I knew it wasn't going to work right as soon as they lined up. We knew that it was just going to be up the middle type of play. I don't, the quarterback sneak, I think, would have made more sense. Herbert's a big guy. There's an argument to be made. You don't want it to be, him to be hurt, ribs. Again, it's a dirty sport, right? You wouldn't be shocked if somebody tried to take a shot at him when he's under the pile. Those are all conversations we could have at a later date. But at the end of the day, that was such a predictable play call that I'm like, oh my God, like do something different. I don't know. And again, so the reason why he did this, it was more predicated on the look. Didn't look like everyone was in tight. They were absolutely jammed in the middle. I don't know what he was seeing um, that I didn't see, but they were just completely in the middle. Thought we could have more of an off tackle play there. They made a good play. No, I think we called a bad play is really what I would say here at this point. So again, we could talk about this all day, but it is frustrating. Joey Bosa, I would say week 12, week 13, who knows? Um, again, here's another conversation. Playing call duties. No, I'm comfortable with how we organize things right now. I think everyone just has to do within their role, continue to do it better. So, all the suggestions that we've had up to this point are continually being shut down. And, again, he's very confident with our setup, coaching staff, players, yada, yada. Again, so it looks like Ronaldo Hill will still be on the sidelines. Coach Staley will still be calling the defensive play calls. This is interesting. I do think they're going to have to go outside the organization. Again, you got to wonder what they're going to give up regarding, maybe going after a Moore or some of these other folks that are out there. Look, OBJ is always someone you could talk about. Who knows, right? You got to wonder what his situation would be coming here, anyways. He probably wants to stay in LA, but it's interesting. So I'm going to finish on this, and then we'll just wrap up the video. We're getting a little long-winded at this point. I don't want to be too long-winded, which I already am at this point. There's just a lot to say here, and so guys, apologize if you're this far down. Thank you so much for listening. I think this is part of my overall frustration. I want to end with this thought. Joseph Day, by the way, I love, everyone calls him Bash. I think that's the right word, connectedness. And it's a weird word, right? It doesn't really make a lot of sense, but I think that's a good word as to what we're struggling with as a team. We're not connecting as a group. The thing that I've always said about football in general, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now, and I'm just going to give my final thoughts. You have to be connected as a team. And the argument that I keep seeing is we're not, right? We're not playing as a team. Again, we talked about this with basketball. Joe Lombardi himself made this point numerous times. You can have a guy like a Michael Jordan and, or Steph Curry, right? And just feed them the ball, they'll score points. The team can support them. You can't do that with football, right? You have all these pieces that are part of your team, but the team still has to execute to be successful. And I think what Sebastian Joseph Day is getting at here is they're not connected or moving as a team. Again, my argument has always been that is coaching. Okay. That is 110% coaching. And again, going back to, even the conversation about Ronaldo Hill taking over the duties is no, I'm comfortable with how we organize things right now. So again, my thoughts are this. My final thoughts are, I feel like Brandon Staley has become stubborn, right? He continues to want to move forward and not change the way he's doing things. That is a problem, right? The NFL, and again, I've already said this before, is very good at adjusting. Okay. I believe that the NFL is adjusted to our offense and knows exactly what they need to do to stop our offense. They have that formula figured out. Okay. That is figured out. Defensively, the NFL has figured out how to play our defense correctly with what we have, right? So when you're not willing to change as a coaching staff to fix things or improve things or switch things up and create more connectedness on the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball, you're in a bad spot. And that's where we're at right now as a team. And again, we're 4-3. This should be more of an upbeat video, but we're moving into the very hard section of our schedule, guys, right? We're in for some pain, right? And so again, in short, my thoughts are, if we're not, you guys all saw the movie Tommy Boy. If you're not growing, you're dying, right? To some degree, that I feel like that's where we're at right now as a team. We are not growing and we are dying. We're slowly getting worse and worse, and we're not progressing forward. So I'll leave it at that. Those are some of my thoughts. Those are my thoughts from, the press conference from Brandon Staley. I had some time to think about it last night. What are your thoughts? What do you think we should do? I mean, how do you feel about some of these adjustments that have been suggested? Uh, Ronaldo Hill, Joe Lombardi. What are your thoughts? I mean, let's have an open discussion about this and really get into what I think we really need to do moving forward. Again, I think some changes would be good. Um, I guess we'll see what happens. But as always, guys, I'm Andrew, Bolt Bros here. See you guys in the next one.